Welcome to the Great Awakening Show. I am Joanne, Divine Life Yogini, and on this week's show, we have Nicole Goott. Nicole is an author, facilitator, thought partner, and spiritual consultant. Nicole's teaching reflects a fusion of synthesis of more than 2 decades of study in various approaches to mind, body, and spiritual practice. Nicole has passionately taught yoga, meditation, and a spiritual practice of self-discovery in group classes, workshops, and intensive in the United States and internationally. Her forthcoming book, Yoga and the 5 Elements, Spiritual Wisdom for Everyday Living, offers a practical and modern approach to timeless wisdom for contemporary students and spiritual seekers in a framework that integrates the physical body with the inner terrain of subtle bodies. Nicole teaches workshops and lectures, as well as offering personal consultation sessions.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Nicole, welcome to the Great Awakening Show.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Lovely to meet you.
Yes, and it's lovely to meet you too. And wow, I've got some wonderful questions for you today and your incredible book. So thank you for being here and with all of your divine wisdom and knowledge for sharing with our audience. Definitely.
Thanks for hosting me. I'm really thrilled to be here today. So
Lovely.
Looking forward to our conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Nicole, I believe that we are going through, humanity is going through a great awakening. What does this mean to you and for us all?
Gosh, that's a great question. It's kind of a big question, I think.
I know it is. I know.
I think the way I would start to answer that is, we've become so much more global as a society, as a species. We're so much more interconnected than we've ever been before. And I think there's a lot of pressure in that global system that's asking us to think about how we interact with one another, to really lift our consciousness up, to be more present, to be more kind, to be more tolerant, more compassionate of one another. So in terms of thinking about awakening, there's a pressure and an invitation. Can we rise to the challenge of being more aware of one another, being more less selfish, more kind of other oriented, to have more of that open-heartedness and that compassion. So I think that's one way I think about awakening. It's just this pressure, this challenge for us to kind of rise to meet it.
Yes, and to come together. I think it's a real unity consciousness and love awareness, coming together with our humanity, because that's what we all share, isn't it? Our humanity and our divinity, because we're all human and we're all divine, aren't we, when we have that?
Right.
So, coming together, it's such a time of unity. We're realizing, our brothers and sisters around the world, it's a real, as you said, the pressure. It's a very challenging yet very enlightening time. Wouldn't you say that?
I would, and I love the word that you used, unity. Unity consciousness. That's an invitation to realize that we are all interconnected, that we live in a system of interdependence, that we aren't these separate selves that we often think we are. The way we sort of reify this concept of self as a separate self. And there's this, as we awaken to more of who we are, when we realize that we're more than just a physical body, we realize that we are, this divine light inside, or a soul or a spirit. More of us sort of opens up to this idea that we are present and connected in everyday life, right?
Yes.
So, all of our actions have an impact, and all the things that we experience, there's an interdependent connection, and not just with human beings, but the planet itself, nature itself.
So true. That is so true. And, you know, everything. And when we awaken to that, we can't have that selfishness. We become selflessness, because when we realize what we do affects others, then we can't wage conflict or war upon them, because we're going to be doing that upon ourselves. Because as you said, we're
Right.
all interconnected. When people awaken to that, you know, that there's only
Right.
one soul consciousness, and it is shared by every living being. It's just one
Right.
consciousness, isn't it? That's been splintered and put into every person, every physical body. You know, that's
Right.
just like, wow, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, as we consider sort of the time we're in, um, I take a reincarnational point of view. So I think about what our actions are in terms of the karma that we create. Karma meaning, in very simplistic terms, cause and effect. And even if you don't take a reincarnational point of view, we can still think about how our actions today have consequences, not just tomorrow, but really kind of even immediately in the moment. And as we sort of step back and try to have less selfishness and more selflessness, we're actually considering or starting to think about what the consequences of our actions are and that impact that we have, not just in this lifetime. Again, if you take that reincarnational point of view, what is it sort of in future lifetimes? We plant seeds today and they bear fruit at some point.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. That's why every action, every thought, every feeling really needs to be a sacred action, thought, and feeling. You know, then you don't create any more, you know, karma. You've got to be
Right.
conscious of what you give out, because everything is creating, isn't it? And everything is cause and effect. Everything is coming back. Whatever we give out, we receive back. So that's so true. Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Gosh, beautiful. And Nicole, please tell us about this fascinating book, Yoga and the Five Elements, and how working with the seen and unseen energies and forces within and without helps us to have more balance, you know, and fulfillment in our lives. So tell us about your wonderful book.
Sure. So let me unpack that in a few sort of sentences. I'm going to start with yoga and the idea of yoga. I think many people who think about yoga, especially in the West, think of it as a physical practice.
Yeah.
But if we look at sort of the root of what yoga means, it's a philosophy and a method for learning more about yourself and becoming united at all your levels of being. And not just with yourself, but with union of everything around us. That's back to that unity consciousness that we were just talking about. And in terms of how we do that, how we experience that union through all levels of our being, I think we have five layers of consciousness, also called subtle bodies, and these relate to five elements. And so these subtle bodies and the elements are, so beyond the physical body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, we have a causal soul body, and then we have a body which connects us to that unity consciousness with everyone. And at each level, we have these elements. So we're a microcosm of the larger macrocosm. So earth, water, air, fire, and space, also in some teachings called Akasha. And really what we're looking for, I think at the root of every human experience is, how do we experience peace, inner peace, or it starts, at least I think, with inner peace, to experience outer peace and harmony and joy. And joy comes from, in my experience, satisfaction and fulfillment. And so each level we have needs at each of these levels of our being. And when we can meet those needs, we can experience greater satisfaction, greater fulfillment, and ultimately that opens the door to joy. And I make the distinction between joy and happiness. I think happiness is an emotion and it's fleeting, and the things that we think that will make us happy often don't. So we kind of have the human tendency, the ego personality that craves or doesn't want things. We have fear and we have desire or aversion. And really, we're trying to step out of that habitual mode of thinking and feeling, and instead see what are the forces operating. And so we can tap into the underlying energy of things. We're able to kind of take what I think of as the soul's perspective, which is free of ego, personality, judgment, and likes and dislikes. That's what, often gets us caught up in feeling out of flow, feeling stuck, feeling
Attachments.
blocked.
Ego.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the book is designed to, for someone who's looking to experience or discover tools for inner knowing and inner peace and harmony, and to find joy and satisfaction. I think that's what the book is meant to guide people to discover for themselves. Because ultimately, I believe we all have this wisdom within us. We just need to be reminded.
Exactly. That's so true.
Just be reminded.
Yes. And we are all energy beings having a human life experience, and
Right.
everything is energy, isn't it? Thoughts, feelings, words that go out, everything is energy. And it's so important to understand about where you're putting your energy and where your energy is depleting. What makes it depleted? How can you raise your energy? But people don't understand about this. We've never been taught this in school. We're just taught about the physical. We are just this physical thing, and we are not divine. We're sinners and all of this. Which has made us.
Sure.
It's just so ridiculous. They've taken our divinity and our energy away from us, I believe. The powers that be. So yeah. So does it? Talk to us about the energy and the energy system, because I know, it's all we've got 72,000 channels in the body, haven't we? Yeah. And they're all connected to the chakras, our vehicles, of consciousness, aren't they? And so tell us more about the energy system within the bodies.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you think about, as you mentioned, your physical body, that we're more than that. If you can try to imagine that we're surrounded by an energy field. I think some people, maybe
Aura.
some of your listeners, think
aura,
of it exactly.
And you can call it the toroidal field, the torus as well. Yeah, the aura.
Right, or the human energy field. So it's not really a new concept. Really what we're pointing to is something that we're already aware of that is there, but how to tune into it, how to think about it. So, if we imagine that, and I start from the body out, even though
so can I just ask you?
Yes.
Is the body, we are surrounded by the spiritual, yeah? So the dense body, the dense physical body is the first. And then as we come out, we get lighter and lighter, and it goes into the spiritual, which surrounds us and is all around us. Is that right?
Yes, that's definitely one way to think about it.
Okay.
Because we start in the body, and I guess let me put it this way. I don't think about consciousness or the soul being in the physical body itself.
No.
In other words, if we have to look around and we had to search to find spirit within us, it's not a physical thing that we can sort of touch and feel, like I could touch my hands and know that these are my hands. So the way I would imagine it is, think about putting a glove on your hand. And the analogy, or by analogy, the soul is projected into the body. So when we talk about going from the body outwards, we're really just using that as a kind of a way to contextualize it so that our minds can have that conceptual framework. So as we explore beyond the body, we have these subtle layers or subtle bodies. And body is a really helpful word, because if you think about a body is a container. So our physical body helps us navigate on a physical plane in physical reality. The subtle bodies do the same at a subtle level. That's that unseen energy that we're talking about. So we have this physical body, your etheric body or your pranic field, which is just, sort of my hands are really just about 10 inches from the surface of my physical body. And then we move out and explore these layers. And each body is a vehicle for consciousness. And it helps us navigate in physical reality and also in non-physical reality. That's the other thing we need to remember. We're made of both spirit and matter.
Yes.
So there's this movement really between almost bidirectional. You can think of moving back and forth between these different levels of being. And as a vehicle of consciousness, just like the body has physical needs, each body itself has a set of needs. So, what do our emotions need? Well, for one of the things I talk about in my book in Yoga and the Five Elements is we need emotional fluency. Just as you were saying before about things that we're not taught when we're growing up, we all experience social and family conditioning, and I think one of the great challenges or things that we're not taught is what our emotions are and how to be with them without becoming overwhelmed by them.
Yes.
And similarly, being able to be aware of our thoughts. So that's the mental body, but it's more than just your thoughts. It's the kind of the seat of your beliefs and your values, attitudes, and then beyond that we have a causal or a soul body. That's the seat really of our intention in this life, our purpose, what we're here to fulfill, and that's multi-dimensional.
Yes.
Not just one thing. So
Yeah.
I'll pause there and see if
That's
you've
great.
got more questions on that.
Also, can I ask you about the pain body? Because the pain body, where would that come in? Because the pain body is where we hold our repressed emotions, past experiences that we have not dealt with. It's all inside. It's like the shadow. It's like the darkness part of ourselves. And if we don't deal with that in the moment, then we store that in the emotional pain body. So obviously the emotional body, isn't it? The pain body. Can you just go on a little bit about that?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever thought about it in those terms, but maybe I can put it in this framing and see if it resonates. So pain for me is another way of thinking about suffering, and suffering for the majority of what we experience. And I say that because part of what we're probably talking about is the average pain that the typical things that we would experience. Separating it out from violence and serious war and that kind of thing. But the suffering that we can often create for ourselves that gets stored at these different levels. And that suffering is often rooted in an unmet need. Suffering is quite a large concept to think about. And so can pain be, if you think of them as two sides of the same coin. And if we kind of break it down to something a lot more concrete and simple, what need didn't get satisfied? So, and that could be anything from as simple as a conversation that didn't have its full expression to kind of our root core needs, which is every human being has the need to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood, really fundamentally, deeply. And that's at the soul level. And very often when we're not met at those levels, we experience some form of suffering, either because of how we've perceived an experience or how somebody projected something onto us. And those experiences get stored, I think is maybe what you were saying, and they get stored at these different levels. So it'll get stored as a belief, I'm not lovable.
Yeah. Because all emotion is energy, and they get stored in the energy body. It can be a wounding.
Yes.
It's like a wounding, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we create these narratives. We can create these stories. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough, or whatever that story is. And then at the emotional level, is not having the way to express that, those deep feelings, the desire to care for and be cared for. And as we know, the somatic experience, a lot of that can sometimes show up in the physical body. So we things that get stored up, because we're both spirit and matter, that spirit energy that needs somehow to manifest and express itself. It has to go somewhere.
It goes into the physical as an illness or a problem in the physical body.
Right, right. And then it comes up so that we can be reminded to deal with it. So
Yes.
pain is actually a call to turn attention towards what's difficult, as opposed to turning away. So we very often turn away from pain, but really pain is a signal. No, pay attention.
Yes.
Pay attention to me. Listen to me.
That's so true. That is so true. Definitely. Wow. Yes. And just that's beautiful. And of course, yoga and working energetically opens up the chakras and releases, gives you free flow of energy through your energy system, which helps to release these blocked emotions, which are trapped energy within the subtle energy bodies. Isn't that true?
When we work with the somatic experience in the body, we're really working with what's stuck there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't necessarily need to know what it is that got stuck there.
No.
But we just know that there's been a release, that something got stuck in the body, and that's had now the time and the space and the support to be let go of.
Beautiful.
Sometimes we need to bring a bit more conscious attention, right? There's something in the body, there's a message. So when we're in dialogue with ourselves, when we're really deeply in tune, we can have that conversation with what's happening. So when we're present, when we're mindful, and part of what yoga does, both on a physical and an inner practice, is it's teaching, or actually we're re-remembering how to be mindful and present with what is, which is ourselves, and to be in the moment.
Yes, with the higher self, listening to that inner voice, that intuition, that divine intelligence that comes in. Beautiful, beautiful. And please describe, how do the 5 elements and the 5 bodies, how do they, what are the different properties, but what are the, how do they connect as well in your book?
Yeah, good question. So the 5 elements, as we said earlier, were the great macrocosmic elements. So earth is where we begin, and we move to water.
With the physical body. Earth is the physical body in this physical realm. Yeah.
Exactly. So earth, and I'll just go through the elements, and then I'll relate them back to the subtle bodies. So earth, water, air, fire, and space. So earth, as you say, relates to the physical body. Water relates to our emotional or astral body. And I say astral because our emotions are not just our physical experiences, but our inner experience. So also our dream life, for example. Air relates to the mental body. So think of air as perspective in that one sense, and being able to have a higher point of view, to have a clear mind, to be able to see things from a place of equipoise and equanimity. That's air, how it relates to the mental body. Fire relates to the causal or soul body, because fire is a property of transformation and illumination. And it's also the energy, the drive, and the motivation and enthusiasm we have to express our full selves in physical reality. And then space, and this is really just a quick summary, space is that unity consciousness. So when we're connected to the Buddhic body, so Buddhic is that oneness, that unity.
It's like the oversoul, or God, goddess, whatever source, whatever you wish to call that.
So I actually talk about only 5 bodies, but there's more beyond that. And when you talk about source and a kind of oversoul, we're actually going a little beyond the Buddhic body, as I understand it. So we're talking about a divine body, or sort of that kind of nirvanic plane. but I've limited my my
Yeah.
book and my discussion to
Yes.
something that's a little bit more bite-sized
Yes. Yes.
and digestible.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so,
Beautiful.
okay, so coming, yes, so I think if there was anything else in the question, there was about how do they relate to each other.
Mm.
So, with the subtle bodies being vehicles of consciousness, I think of the elements really as kind of emissaries almost. They're facilitators for us to work at these different levels. So, if we think about being both spirit and matter, how do we know that we are spirit in matter? And one of the ways we know that is through the symbols of our experiences. And that includes everything from the home we live in that represents a large structure of our beliefs, as an example, the people that we draw to ourselves, the things that we draw in, the experiences we have. Those are all symbolic experiences. And so the five elements, each of them represents these different kinds of, or they reflect back these different kinds of experiences and symbols that we're learning. So I believe that we live in a universe that's based on the principle of learning and growth. And through the elements, one of the things that they do is they teach us these selves. And that's how we learn to also modulate how we're growing, how we're developing and evolving. Um, so, for example, let's talk about for a moment emotions. Think about a flood that's
Yeah.
happened because a dam, the dam wall broke down. And our emotions are kind of similar, when we haven't allowed for, or we haven't had an opportunity to have our emotions be fully expressed, and we just let them build and build and build. At some point, they're eventually going to come out. And sometimes it's a little bit like a flood or kind of explosive.
Yes.
Um, and so when we can think about it in those terms, we can see, oh, okay, I can step out of the label and the judgment of I'm too emotional, or I think as is often been socially conditioned, the way women have been described as very emotional, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of a classic trope.
That's right.
We can really just see we can just see that it's a human experience, both in ourselves and in others. And so we then understand why would emotions build up like that? What do we need in order to in order for those emotions to settle, and to find that place of inner calm. And also, then, what are the tools that we have in order for us to work with our emotions so that they don't build up like that again?
Yes.
It can be, we all know that when we're overwhelmed with emotion like that, it can be an intense experience.
Mm.
Um, so, what can we do to find ways to not have those kind of intense, massive experiences um, that take us off our center?
Beautiful. And it's really profound because as the five subtle energy bodies, correlate with the five elements, so too the tarot. I mean, I'm a big tarot buff, yeah, but the
Okay,
tarot, you've got the
interesting.
water, you've got the cups, which are water, yes.
Hmm.
You've got the swords, which are the mental, and then you've got the wands, which are fire, yeah, and then you've got the earth, which is the grounding pentacles. So and that tarot has been around for
Interesting.
centuries. It's so old, tarot, so that is amazing in itself. I was
Hmm.
just thinking about that as you were talking. Wow. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, Joanne. I'm not very versed in tarot, but I think the point you're making, though, is that because the elements are universal and they are these macrocosmic elements that we have access to, we can see them in lots of other frameworks. And we can draw on those energies to to guide us, to enlighten us a little bit more.
Yes,
Yeah, I just had a moment
definitely.
of yeah, wow, okay, we
Yeah,
touched on something really essential there.
definitely. It was like, wow, I was feeling that as well. But so harnessing the five elements, harnessing,
Hmm.
give us a few practices or exercises? I know that you've got them all in the book, just maybe a couple of them, to help, with our energy, to help with the energy of the elements on a daily basis, because I think that's really important. People have to try and get in control. We're all here to learn and evolve, to become the master of our emotions, the master of our thoughts, the master of our feelings, the master of our words, because as you said, as we said in the beginning, everything we give out comes back. It's cause and effect. So being the master. So how do we do that in everyday lives through the practices of the elements?
Yeah, and exactly. Spiritual wisdom for everyday living is sort of the key to the book, is making it practical. So, for example, when we work with Earth, one of the things that can happen for us is we become ungrounded and uncentered, right? And that's something I think that's familiar to many people, this concept of being ungrounded. And we can see it both in ourselves or in others. And a very simple exercise that I work with is a meditation where you can be sitting, or you can be laying down on the ground, or you can be standing. And ideally, if you can, be outside, because when we're connected actually to the earth itself, we are much closer to tapping into that grounded, stabilizing earth energy. And we can feel the vitality, exactly, the vitality and the support that comes from earth energy. So that's one meditation practice. And I actually have that recorded. It's on my website. So anybody who's listening today could go to my website and download this little guided meditation. And it's really just a simple visual practice of imagining this supportive, vital earth energy coming up through the physical body, and reminding yourself of feeling that stability through the feet, because we're that spirit and matter. So feeling ourselves fully rooted in our material self, but then also being able to connect to our non-material self. That's the spirit energy. That's one of the practices that I describe in my book. And you can do that anywhere, anytime, every day, whenever you
and
feel
you must
the
do
need.
it without shoes, without any plastic or rubber shoes. It's got to be to get
if you're
that.
outside if you're
Take your shoes
outside
off.
and it's a warm day, take your shoes off.
Even if it's a
Absolutely.
little bit chilly, still take your shoes off.
Maybe not if there's snow on the
No,
ground.
not snow, but that's me. That is.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah. But that's beautiful. That is beautiful to ground yourself.
Yeah. And then, with water, one of my favorite exercises is to work with journaling. And, when we can empty out our thoughts and our feelings just on a piece of paper that is for ourselves, I imagine that, many listeners today have had experiences as kids where we had a diary, and we kept a diary to ourselves when we were little. I know I did. Mine was like I think it was a Hello Kitty, and it was sort of sacred to me. But it's a practice that's actually stayed with me, and it's nothing new. I'm not, there's nothing new about it, but it is a reminder of how we can connect to releasing our emotions is through journaling.
Yes.
And then there's, connected to the emotions in the mind. So working with water and air is another kind of practice. So if we talk about meditation, one of the fundamental basics of meditation is breath, right?
Yeah.
Breath is essential to meditation. And this is a very simple practice, simple in concept, not easy to do, which is to watch your breath and to be still and present with your breath. And that starts to establish what I call witness consciousness. Witness consciousness is really the ability to find a neutral state of mind that's free of, it's emotionally neutral, it's calm, there's no judgment. And when we can find that place, we can look at ourselves and other experiences from that emotionally neutral, calm place. And heavens knows, I think we could all do with that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah.
with the amount of information and just what's happening in the news on a day-to-day basis, I think a lot of people get become what's the word I'm looking for? Feel kind of empathy overload.
Yes, definitely. So
So
being the observer, because we are not our thoughts and feelings and emotions. We are the soul consciousness behind all of it. So if you can step
yes.
back, and observe, and listen to your intuition when you're on the
Right.
internet. Or, I mean, I don't watch TV. I don't know many people who do anymore, but like if people are watching it, be mindful of what you're taking in.
Yes.
Is it good for your higher self? Is it enhancing you? Is it
Hmm.
too much of watching that darkness and that negativity? Because that's all there is on that television, is darkness and negativity, mostly anyway. So be careful and mindful of what you're taking in, because that can disrupt your psyche.
Hmm. I think that's such a great point, and it sort of connects to the title of your show, Great Awakening, and what we're talking about at the beginning, because when we draw to ourselves, whether it's books or stories or listening to other teachers or other people who are raising our consciousness, right? We're drawing to ourselves the tools and the methods that are there to uplift our consciousness, uplift our spirit, as opposed to pull it down. That kind of taps back into that awakening, right? Because our
Yes.
consciousness is more open. We're at a higher vibration. Um, yeah,
Yeah, because
more open.
everything is evolving and everything is ascending. Our kundalini energy will always rise. I always say this, it's like we come from the oneness, the spiritual heaven world, or whatever you want to call it, from the oneness. And then we come into duality to experience the good and the bad,
Hmm.
the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine. So bring that back into balance and experience the Mother Earth. And then we rise up with the Kundalini. We're always
Right.
rising up to the Father, aren't we? To get that Shakti and Shiva unity, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's so beautiful. But that's what it's all about. Having that balance is wow, profound. But carry on. What you were saying was some of the other ones. What was it for the practice? So you said about the earth and the water
Hmm.
and the air.
Yeah. Right. Um, so those meditation practices. And then I think in terms of fire is really interesting because again, fire is such an alchemical element. It's an alchemical force. If you think about how fire, when it burns really hot, can turn metal into liquid. So one of the things that we're learning at this level is because we live in a world that's a physical world based on form, um, one of the ways we can easily get stuck in form is believing that form can't change. And we sort of have to be reminded that forms are constantly changing and being comfortable with experimenting and shifting in and out of form. So, what do I mean by form? Form is everything that's material and
Physical.
everything that's non-material in the sense of how we think about our life. So, material would be like a house. We can get very attached to where we live and think about our identity attached to that place. But when it's time to move on, or because for whatever the reasons are, or we've decided we want to move on, we're really changing the form, right? And, um, you know, we have, one of the things that we get stuck on is that, we identifying who we are with that concept, with that structure. In a sort of less tangible sense, it's our life purpose, our dharma, our path in life. And because this is the soul body, the soul is just energy. Um, but the soul has to express itself in certain ways. And so, how we identify, or how we identify to others, and how others identify with who we are, is really just a label. Um, and so, part of what the practice teaches there is thinking about becoming more fluid with moving in and out of these forms, being able to let go of the habit of the ego personality that likes the identity and the label, and instead sort of becoming a little bit more free with that. Because when we're stuck in form, we often deplete our life force and we become less motivated, we have less enthusiasm. We just sort of don't want to get out of bed because we don't love what we're doing.
And we can't create, because
right.
we are creatrixes and we are creators, as we said before, what we give out, you get back. And it's so important. It's all about the energy that we emit,
right.
that goes out into this quantum unfathomable world to bring us the ideas through in divine intelligence to then go forward and create ourselves anew, create ourselves and get out of that comfort zone to create our dream, to create our goals, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I find it interesting that, we're sort of with this new young generation. I'm not sure what it Gen Z,
oh yeah
maybe.
yeah.
There's definitely what I've noticed in this younger generation, more flexibility and more freedom to express these different, moving in and out of different forms, being willing to play and experiment, and not get so hung up on, what was traditionally seen, and not to offend anyone, but the idea of having a job for 50 years that you did your whole life.
No.
And partly because it was maybe expected of you, or that's what society demanded.
Yes.
And we're sort of at a time where there's a lot of flexibility to choose and to experiment and play. And as you said, create. Absolutely, we're creative beings. Our energy is creative. And so figuring out what that creative energy is and that creative expression, and really being comfortable with expressing who you are, right? Coming back to, I think, what you said earlier about being divine light, divine being within, that's a radiant light, a radiant energy. So expressing that into the world, letting that shine, and not worrying about what other people think.
Yes.
That's really challenging, I think, is to not care what other people think, to not let other people's judgments define who you are and what you're here to do.
That is so true. And also to not worry if you make mistakes, because we're all going to make mistakes, and to carry on. And even if you get knocked down, just rise up and never give up and never give in and persevere, and bless that person you once was, and bless the mistakes that you've made, because they caused you to get onto another path that led you to the correct way in the end. That every single mistake always leads you into the correct path in the end. Otherwise you'll never get out of that comfort zone. It's a fear, isn't it? It
is, for sure.
Beautiful.
And I think what you said reminds me of a phrase that my husband and I use, is to forgive your lesser knowing self. To forgive your lesser knowing self is really the, permission that you are learning, and that what you knew then was different than what you know now. I mean, that's why it's called hindsight. We can always look back and say, oh, well, I could have done it better. But then we don't give ourselves the permission to actually learn the lesson when we're sort of shaming ourselves or feeling guilty in some way. Because in that moment, we didn't have the knowledge that we have now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
and that's
learning.
Yeah. But that's forgiveness of self. We're all just learning, aren't we, on this crazy multi-dimensional journey that we're on, and this crazy life is just to become better than we were before, to become more forgiving, to become more loving, to become more kind and more righteous, isn't it, than we were before, and to help others, to be of service. And one of my old gurus that I used to follow, earth peace through self peace. It has to do with yourself first. We can't change anything out there until we change within. Because when you change within, then your outside changes. You know, it's a mirror. As you said,
Yes.
the microcosm to the macrocosm. Change,
Yeah.
you know, it's always the way. People go out into the 3D to try to change things, but you've got to change your energy first. If you want to change your outside, and if you want to make your dream a reality in form, you have to change the inner, which changes the outer.
Absolutely, I agree. Inner harmony equals outer harmony. Inner peace equals outer peace. So yes, very much starts with inner work, working on ourselves. Yeah, I think we're in agreement there.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I mean, it's just fascinating. Your book is just so beautiful and fascinating with the 5 elements, and you know how they all interact with that. So and the exercises in there. So are they all inside of the book? Exercises and practices?
Yes, I think there's something like 20 different practices in the book, everything from meditations to journal exercises to inner inquiry exercises that you can do. And they're, you know, at the intersection of kind of the end of every chapter, there's something to practice and work with.
Wonderful. Because the more we work on ourselves, we call it the inner work, don't we? The inner work. Yeah. The more we do that, the more we can let go of the things that are limiting us and blocking us, you know, and the more we let the light in, and the more our inner guidance system works, the more the wisdom of our soul, you know. Tell us about that. Describe our inner guidance system, the wisdom of our soul, and how we can access it.
Yeah, great. It's a great question. You know, think about, I think about, you know, inner guidance as your soul's wisdom. You know, it's like your inner GPS system.
Yes.
And when we're embodied in a physical body, we have both that soul level of being, that's the spirit level, and then we have our physical level, our what I call the ego personality construct. And when we are solely identified with the ego personality, we think of ourselves really as the self with a boundary. That's where we develop selfishness, because we think of being a separate self. But there's always the soul within, guiding us, and offering wisdom and really setting the course for our life. And the ego personality is really, its function is really to be the filmmaker in a way, right? The soul is like the director, right? They've written the story, the soul's written the story. It's really guiding the path, and the ego personality is really meant to be just sort of, you know, directing our focus and how we come into being. And so when we're able to be in that dialogue and take direction from the soul, we're often in better alignment with ourselves. We're much more in tune with who we are, what we're here to do. We have a lot more life force. I always talk about life force because you can feel when your life force is depleted or when you're not in flow, that something is missing. And when we're not listening to that inner voice, the soul, that higher wisdom, and we're sort of stuck in the habitual ego personality and human tendency of likes and dislikes and judgments, we tune out, we wall out this inner guidance system, but it's always there.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people might experience it initially as an awakening to just like a knowing or an intuition, right? A feeling. At some level, because we're spirit, we are all empathic. We are all intuitive. We're all psychic.
Yes.
We all have access to this web of unseen energy, unseen information. It's all there. And, you know, tuning into that inner voice opens up that inner vocabulary, that inner dialogue, that inner expression.
Yes.
And when we allow that inner guidance system to direct us, and we sort of, and I say we, I mean the ego personality, when we allow the ego personality to be not in control,
That's right.
we open up to the magic of life.
Yes. It's like your,
You know, so instead,
it's like your channel, isn't it? You're channeling, through
yes.
that divine intelligence, which is, because
Hmm.
your soul is a part of the of the all, so
Right.
it's so true what you just said. And every morning we have a choice to wake up and go with the ego personality or the true self, which is the
Yeah.
soul, which is the righteous
Hmm.
soul. So it's a battle. They tell us, they say it to us, it's the dark and the light, isn't it, within us? But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's interesting. I think, that darkness is really the shadow, the blind spot, what we
Yes.
can't see in ourselves. Um, and when we're sort of stuck in the ego personality, the likes, dislikes, the habits, we're kind of more involved in the shadow self, the blind spots that we can't see. And so, part of what we do, part of what the soul is always doing is drawing to itself experiences that reflect back those blind spots,
Mm,
right? So that we can see ourselves. This is why we're always in dialogue with others. It's the sort of the foundation of our relationships. We draw to ourselves reflections so that we can learn and grow because
so true.
otherwise we don't, how do you know yourself? It's sort of what you see reflected back to you.
We're all a
Um,
mirror, aren't we? We're all a mirror to each other. And
yeah.
people will come in, friends, family, or whoever, and they will say something, and it will hit where it's supposed to hit, because it's that we're a mirror to each other, and we help each other identify the light and dark aspects within each other.
Hmm. Yeah. And I wanted to add, to this question of soul guidance, your GPS system. So we have inner senses, not just outer senses. So our outer senses are like our touch, our touch senses, our smell, our hearing senses, what we see with our physical eyes. But when we close our eyes and we close this, these are sensory doorways to physical reality, and we open our inner sensory doorways to inner perception, that's when we start to tune into the inner information that's available to us. And not just within, but what's also available in the force field of energy around us from the universe, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Beautiful.
So opening up to your inner sense perception is, one of the things that, I talk about is opening up to those, it's a muscle, really. You said earlier at the beginning
It's
about things
like,
that we're not taught.
yes, it's called the sixth sense, isn't it? They
Yeah.
call it the sixth sense. And I call it, I mean, when I go and I meditate, it's the pineal gland acts like an antenna and picks
Hmm.
up in that multi-dimensional quantum world out there all the things that we need, for our life, destiny, purpose, to keep us going on that trajectory. And that's why
Right.
it's so important to, do the inner work so that you can clean your channel in all ways, body, mind, and soul, holistically, to hold that information, and to let go. We can't let go of the ego completely, can we, Nicole? Because we need
No,
it to function in this
totally.
world. Yeah, but we
Totally.
can
And
we
I
can
think
use it as a
that's,
tool, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great misnomer that the ego is something to get rid of.
No.
It isn't.
Yeah.
Um, we actually want to transcend the habitual attachment and identification that we are the ego, because we're not. We're more than that. And the ego is really, to use an analogy, a different analogy, the horse and the rider.
Yeah.
The you know the ego is the vehicle, right? The soul is really the rider, the director. So when we learn to transcend our habituated attachment to being an ego, then we're able to let go of being ruled by that way of being and instead operate from a higher level, which is the soul's perspective. But yeah, so we need an ego. We need that sort of drive in our day-to-day life to be able to get things done, to function in physical reality. But I think very often in some spiritual teachings, or misunderstanding in spiritual teachings, is this idea of ego death, to kill your ego. But it's really a misunderstanding and a misapplication of what is intended by killing the ego, because the fear that we have, sort of a deep fear, the ego personality, is that it will be annihilated. That's really the fear of death. It's an ego fear, and it's also our own human fear of dying.
Definitely.
But that's maybe another topic
Yeah,
for
yeah,
another
yeah,
day. But yeah,
definitely.
don't kill your ego.
Yeah. No, because we need it to survive in this world, the 3D. It's like, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. But I think the more you can tune into the soul, the more truthful, righteous, beautiful harmony and balance you will have in your everyday life.
Yes. Yeah, beautifully
Wow.
said.
Wow. And Nicole, where can we read your book, your beautiful book?
Thanks for asking that, Joanne. It's available online, Amazon, bookshop.org, anywhere that books are available online. And I'm not sure about local bookstores because you have a million listeners, so I don't know what's available to people in physical stores, but if you can find it, I encourage people to buy from your local shop local if you can, but definitely online. It is also available as an ebook, so I guess that's Kindle.
Right.
Um,
Wonderful. Mm.
and yeah, so
Wonderful. And what's your website, please?
it's my name, Nicole Goott. So Goott is two O's, two T's.com. And you'll find there links to the book, links to what I'm teaching. If anyone's interested, I have a lecture and a workshop coming up with an organization called the Theosophical Society in America. And that's actually tonight, and a workshop on November 4th. So if anybody wants to learn more about applying what's in the book with me, that's a great way to do it, is through those workshops.
Wonderful. Well, Nicole, I would just like to say thank you so much for your enlightening divine wisdom and for sharing it on the Great Awakening Show.
Joanne, thank you so much. I've loved being here. It's been wonderful to meet you and have this conversation this afternoon for you. And to all your listeners, I hope you enjoyed hearing our conversation. And thank you for your time. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.